All right, welcome everybody to the RS Sports Podcast, episode number 23. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is our NBA show. We are going to get to that in a few moments, but I do want to talk about a big news story that came out of the sports world today. Before I jump into that, it is with a heavy heart that I bring this news to you. Hall of Fame baseball player, one of the greatest baseball players to ever play. Top three in my opinion. I don't think you can name three better players than this guy, but Hank Aaron has passed away at the age of 86. He transcended the world of sports, not just the world of baseball. I mean, Hank Aaron was one of the biggest sports figures you could possibly think of. And not only that, outside of the world of sports, he was a great civil rights activist. He fought for African American rights during his time in the league. And just some stats here. He's number 2 all time in home runs at 755. He's number 1 in RBIs all time at 2,297. He's played 3,298 games. He's had 12,364 at bats, 13,941 plate appearances, and he's had 3,771 hits. Quite the career for Mr. Hank Aaron. And, needless to say, he will be missed by everybody in the sports community. I mean, Hank Aaron, for a while, he actually held the home run record. He passed Babe Ruth. And that was one of the biggest milestones, of his time. A lot of people, when you think about baseball back then, you think of Hank Aaron passing Babe Ruth in the home run race. And that was some really big news that came out of the sports world. And, again, needless to say, Hank Aaron, you will be missed. And rest in peace to him, one of the greatest baseball players to ever play the game. Now to our scheduled NBA show. We had a lot going on this week in the NBA. I want to cover a lot of the games that happened, a lot of the big games, a lot of the news stories that happened. I'll look at the power rankings, and I will also look at the conference standings. So let's jump right into it. First, we're going to go to our news section. Here are some of the big stories that came out of the NBA this week. And we have a trade. Cleveland has traded Kevin Porter Jr., who averages 10 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists a game. He is off to Houston for a protected second-round pick after an apparent confrontation with the Cavaliers GM. It also says that he had several incidents with the law this season, so he was in some law trouble this season, and he got in a confrontation with the Cavaliers GM, and he is now out of Cleveland. And it seems to me that whenever you get someone like this, like Kevin Porter Jr., because he had trouble in high school too, he had a lot of confrontations with his coaches that sort of made his draft stock decline. When you get a guy like Kevin Porter Jr., that is a guy that you need to get rid of, like, almost immediately. Like, once you realize that a player is a cancer in the locker room, you need to get rid of them immediately. A lot of people didn't agree with the Celtics trading Kyrie Irving, but Kyrie Irving, wasn't playing team basketball when he was in Boston. He was a cancer in the locker room. He wanted to be the guy on that team, and Brad Stevens was trying to build a team where, you don't have the guy on that team. You have multiple guys. You have guys that can it's almost like Brad Stevens was pushing for that team effort, and Kyrie Irving didn't want to be a part of that. Now, that's a lot different from what we're seeing with Kevin Porter Jr. because Kyrie Irving never got into law trouble. But Kevin Porter Jr. now with getting in trouble with the law, having confrontations with the Cavaliers GM, that's just the sign that you got to go. I'm surprised that a team even drafted him, because if I were a GM in this league and he was already having confrontations with his college coach, I wouldn't have even drafted this guy. And Cleveland gets a protected second-round pick. So that could be put to good use. You never know who you're going to get out of the second round of the draft. Or you could leverage that into another trade, maybe for a first-round pick, because the Cavaliers have actually really improved this year. And Kevin Porter Jr. wasn't putting up great stats anyways. He was only averaging 10 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. Double digits in points, but I would have sent him a long time ago. I probably wouldn't have even drafted him but nonetheless, he's Houston's problem now. Houston has Victor Oladipo. I guess we'll see what Kevin Porter Jr. can do for Houston, but I wouldn't be surprised if Houston releases him at least, or tries to trade him again, because if he's had this problem in college and he's had this problem in the NBA, it seems like he's sort of a hothead. I don't think any team would want a guy like that on their team. But yeah, that's what I got for you on there. The protected second-round pick goes to Cleveland, and Houston gets Kevin Porter Jr. Also, this week in the NBA, we found out that Karis LeVert is done for the year after the Pacers medical staff found a small mass on his left kidney. He had said that. Give me 1 second here. He had said that if he would have stayed in Brooklyn, it could have probably, the Pacers finding that, he said, could have actually saved his life, depending on what this mass is. Because obviously Brooklyn didn't know about it, no fault to them. But the Pacers, I guess, had to run a background check, and they found this small mass. So hopefully Karis LeVert gets better. We're pulling for you to get back, Karis. And he's improved over the years. He played for Brooklyn. He was part of that big trade, and then they found that small mass on his left kidney. So he will be done for the year. He will not play anymore this year, and it's a shame. It really is. But obviously, his health and his safety is more important than basketball. And you know what? He could be cleared in the next season, to play. So hopefully Karis LeVert gets cleared to play next season, and hopefully we can see him back on the court. The third piece of news that I have for you guys is that the Wizards are now clear to report back to practice for before their first game in 13 days. Obviously, with COVID protocol, they didn't have enough people to play in these games. They haven't played a game in 13 days. So they are now clear to report back to practice. Bradley Beal was quoted saying, quote, "The health of us is the most important thing, and the safety of us." And he also said that it's unfair that the other teams get to practice and play at a constant rhythm. And also, quote, "It's going to be tough on us," end quote. And I don't have a problem with the first part of that, when he said the health of us is the most important, and safety of us, and the safety of us. That's completely true. Your health is more important than basketball. And that's one of the things I'll preach, with COVID-19 and everything, always, is that health and safety of players is more important than the game itself. What I do disagree with is him saying that it's unfair that teams get to practice and play at a constant rhythm. That's just how it goes. If you're cleared to play in the NBA, if your team is cleared to play, you're going to play. There are teams that I've seen this year that only had 8 players on their team, 8 players available. Look at the Philadelphia 76ers about a week ago. So I don't think it's unfair, because everybody else is going through COVID-19 protocols and getting tested. It's just the way it goes. You can't stop the whole season every time a team gets COVID. You see these games getting postponed left and right in the NBA. So you realize how many stoppages you'd have to have in the season every time a player or a team can't have enough players because of COVID. It's you just got to roll with the punches at this point. And I get the unprepared part of it, but that's why the NBA is giving you a practice session before your next game. You just got to roll with the punches. These are unprecedented times, so I understand where he's coming from, but I also think that he needs to realize that if you were going to stop the season every time a team couldn't play because of COVID-19, you can't do that. The season would never end at this point. And Coach Brooks of the Washington Wizards said it's definitely not an ideal situation. No, it's not. It's not an ideal situation when any team has to sit out because of COVID. It's just, something that happens this day and age in sports. Until we get COVID-19 under control in this country, we're not going to, it's going to be something that's going to affect sports, and you're going to have to postpone games, and you're going to have to, maybe cancel some games. But again, stopping an entire season to wait for a team to get back on the clear to play, you're never going to finish a season that way. It's just the way it is. So there is that. I want to move now to this week's power rankings before I go into this week's games. The Los Angeles Lakers are at the number 1 spot. No surprise there. Milwaukee's at 2. Clippers at 3. Boston at 4. Phoenix at 5. Utah at 6. Brooklyn at 7. Indiana. I almost said Indianapolis. No, Indiana at 8. Philadelphia at 9. And Portland at 10. The Mavs are at the 11th spot right now. So I think the Mavericks should actually, at that 11th spot, should sneak into the top 8 by the end of the season, if I'm looking at this now. Brooklyn's obviously definitely going to go up in the power rankings. I can see them being top 3. I think the Clippers are going to drop a little bit. I just really don't trust the Clippers this year yet. I haven't put my full faith in the Clippers to be a championship contender this year. Boston, I'm surprised, is at 4 because Boston had a pretty rough week, losing a couple games. I think Philadelphia deserves a lot more credit, and they should be up higher on that list because they are still number 1 in the East. Philadelphia is still number 1 in the East. I believe they are 10-5, but still, when you are the number 1 in your conference, you should be at least in the top 5, in my opinion, on the power rankings. So they should definitely be higher on that list, and Portland, I think, will probably move up a little bit. Indiana's going to drop. Phoenix could quite possibly move up. But the rest of the list, seems pretty good to me where we're at in the season right now. But I definitely think that Philadelphia deserves a lot more credit. I would probably put Boston at 9 and Philadelphia at 4 if I was going to switch anybody out based on this week. Because, the power rankings go week by week. So you could drop a couple spots or you could gain a couple spots. Now, dropping 5 spots is highly unlikely in a week if we're talking about Boston and Philadelphia switching places. I would say Boston could probably move to the 7th spot if you want to trade with. I think Philadelphia should. Yeah, it's hard to say. I think Philadelphia should be a lot higher on that power rankings list. I think the Mavericks are going to move up. I think Indy's going to drop out. So I think the Mavericks are actually going to take that 8 spot soon. And Indiana is not going to be in the playoff. Well, I shouldn't say the playoff race. They're not going to be in the top 10 of the power rankings. I think they could end up at that 11th spot. That's where I stand right now with the power rankings. And obviously the Lakers at the top. There's no surprise there. The Lakers are dominating the league right now. I think once Brooklyn gets a hold of them, though, I think Brooklyn will give them a run for their money. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Moving on to this week's big games. Monday, since I did the show last Friday, I'm going to go Monday through Friday. Monday, Brooklyn defeated Milwaukee 125-103. Kevin Durant had 30 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. James Harden, who actually debuted on Saturday for the Nets, played pretty well. He had 34 points, 12 assists, and 6 rebounds. And Joe Harris had 20.6 and 6 rebounds. For Milwaukee, we had Chris Middleton with 25 points. Giannis had 34 points, 12 rebounds, and 7 assists. Drew Holiday had 22.6 assists and 4 rebounds. And I think this is a testament to what Brooklyn can do, right? Brooklyn has that big 3. We're going to talk about Brooklyn's big 3 a little bit later, but that's a testament to what Brooklyn can do in this league. I feel like a lot of people are underestimating Brooklyn right now, and they shouldn't be underestimating Brooklyn right now because Brooklyn is going to be a powerhouse in the East. I'm one of those people that is a firm believer that Brooklyn can win the NBA championship this year. A lot of people are taking the Lakers as their favorite, and that's fine. You can take the Lakers as your favorite. I think they're a favorite to go to the finals. I don't think they're a favorite to win it. If I had to pick right now the teams that are going to be in the NBA finals, I'd say that the Lakers are going to be against the Brooklyn Nets, and I think the Nets could win that in 6 or 7. My pick where it stands right now is that the Brooklyn Nets will win the NBA championship this year. The Lakers could give them a run for their money, but I think Brooklyn's going to win the NBA championship. You look at a team like Milwaukee, who's number 2 on the power rankings this year, and they're going to be one of the top teams in the East by the end of the year. They have Giannis, they have Drew Holiday, they have Brook Lopez, they have DiVincenzo on that team, Chris Middleton. They're going to be a top team in the East, and Brooklyn defeated them. Now, again, we're going to talk about the big 3 a little bit later, but I think it's worth mentioning that Brooklyn is going to be a powerhouse in the East. with the pickup of James Harden. Also on Monday, Golden State defeated the Lakers 115-113. Curry had 26 points, 7 assists. Kelly Oubre had 23 points. Andrew Wiggins had 18 points. LeBron James had 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. Anthony Davis had 17 points, 17 rebounds, and 7 assists. And Dennis Schroeder had 25 points. Golden State gets the win by 2 over the Lakers. And Golden State actually has been improved. Without Clay, I didn't think they would improve. But they did improve. James Wiseman has proved to be a very good pickup in the draft for them. Draymond Green's playing well. And like I said last week, I believe I said this last week, Golden State could sneak into that 8 spot, I think. They could sneak into the top 8 and be a playoff team. Steph Curry's kind of taking the load right now, taking that team captain role. And I definitely think that the Golden State Warriors could be a team to look out for in the coming weeks. I mean, this season. Come playoff time, I think the Warriors are going to be in that conversation. And as for the Lakers, obviously I picked them to go to the NBA Finals. Where we are at this point in the season, I think it's going to be Lakers, Nets. I did just say that. Because, the Lakers are playing very, very well. LeBron, I think it's needless to say that he's ageless right now. He's old. People talk about him being in his prime. He's still in his prime, in my opinion. Prime LeBron was in Miami. I agree with you there. That was when, he started hitting his prime. He's still in his prime. We have not seen LeBron regress, yet. This guy's like 36 or 37 years old, and we have not seen LeBron regress. Anthony Davis helps him out a lot. You got that front court. They're one of the best front courts in the NBA. But you have to understand that LeBron has not regressed. And this guy, again, is 36 or 37 years old. When we saw Kobe at 36 or 37 years old, Kobe was starting to regress. Kobe was out of his prime at that time. Paul Pierce was out of his prime at that time. LeBron, I'm ready to say that LeBron James is ageless. It doesn't matter what age he is. He could be in the league in his 40s. This is like the equivalent. This is the NBA equivalent to Tom Brady, right? Because we see Tom Brady, who is, I believe he's 42 years old. He's somewhere in his mid-40s. And he's still playing in the NFL at the level that he was 10 years ago. Tom Brady is the equivalent to LeBron James. Or LeBron James is the equivalent to Tom Brady in the NBA. And it's amazing to me. We have not seen LeBron regress yet. I don't know if we're going to see LeBron regress. A lot of people are talking about him playing with his son because his son is probably going to be in the NBA in a few years. I think it's a possibility. If LeBron keeps up the level that he's playing at, I think it's a real possibility. Now, I don't know if LeBron could have ever won a championship by himself with any team because let's look at when he was with the Heat. LeBron had a big 3 with the Heat. He had Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. And now, last year, he won a championship with Anthony Davis. I don't think any player can really win a championship on their own. I don't think Michael Jordan could have won a championship on his own. And I think Michael Jordan's the greatest player in NBA history. I don't think there will ever be a player that's better than Michael Jordan. But yeah, needless to say, LeBron has not regressed. And I don't know when he's going to regress, but I'm ready to say that LeBron's ageless. Our Wednesday games, Cleveland defeated Brooklyn 147-135. It was the first game with the Big 3 in Brooklyn, and I'll talk about the Big 3 in a second. Cedi Osman had 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. Colin Sexton had 42 points, and Taurean Prince, the new pickup for Cleveland, had 17 points and 7 rebounds. Colin Sexton's 42 points really helped Cleveland to the win here. Kevin Durant had 38 points for Brooklyn, 12 rebounds and 8 assists. Kyrie Irving had 37 points. Harden had a triple-double with 21 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists. And I'm going to start with the Big 3 in Brooklyn. The Big 3 got out to a rough start, right? That we've seen that. They lost by more than 10 in their first game together. They were facing Cleveland, who's not a powerhouse in the East quite yet. And James Harden only put up 21 points. And that's not like James Harden to only put up 21 points, to me. To me, James Harden can put up a little bit more than that. But again, when you have a guy like Durant, Irving, and Harden on the floor, somebody may have to score 21 points. Now, granted, James Harden put up a triple-double. But again, I think they need to score a little bit more. And Colin Sexton's 42 points. I don't know when that's going to happen again. But that really, really helped Cleveland. As far, and I think for the big three in Brooklyn, I think they just need to gel. I really think that's all it is. They need to gain experience playing with each other. That's all it is. Harden's liable to put up over 30 in the next game. I wouldn't put it past him. Irving's liable to put up over 30 in the next game. Durant's liable to put up over 30 the next game. Durant's playing like an MVP. And I think the big three is going to be okay. A lot of people talk about their defense, and yes, they do lack a defensive. Identity. They lack a defensive identity right now. I will give you that because DeAndre Jordan's like one of the only players they have on defense. They are an offensive-minded team, but I think that they can develop into a defensive-minded team. Let me remind you that the trade deadline hasn't ended yet, and Brooklyn could make a trade for a defensive player. I think Brooklyn, at the end of the season, is going to be raising the Larry O'Brien trophy, and they are going to be the NBA champions. That's just my opinion. Obviously, I think they may need to get a couple more defensive players to sort of help them out on the defensive end, but I think the big three is going to be fine in Brooklyn. You look at big threes throughout history. LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh in Miami. They lost their first game to the Boston Celtics. You look at the Golden State Warriors. They lost their first game when they had Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry. So I don't think it's very worrisome if they lose multiple in a row and losing starts to become a habit of theirs, which I don't think it will. Then you might want to raise some red flags. But for right now, I think Brooklyn's fine. Moving on to our Thursday game that I want to talk about. The Lakers defeated Milwaukee 113-106. This is a game that I had circled on my calendar for the schedule. Because these are two of the top teams in the NBA. LeBron versus Giannis. You can't beat that. I would always want to see that matchup. LeBron had 34.6 rebounds and 8 assists in the win. Davis had 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope put up 23 points for the Lakers. And for Milwaukee, Chris Middleton had 20 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. Giannis Antetokounmpo had 25 points, 12 rebounds. And Drew Holiday had 22 points and 7 assists. But the Lakers do get the win. And I think what's scary about the Lakers this year is that they have so many weapons. Last year when the season started, I wasn't doing my podcast then last year when the season started, but I was a firm believer last year that the Lakers were not going to get to the finals, let alone win the finals. Now, the Lakers did prove me wrong by the end of the season, but the reason I said that was because I felt like the Lakers did not have enough depth to get there. And they fixed that issue this year. Because you're getting guys that are contributing each night. Schroeder put up 20-plus points the other night. Last night, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope put up 23 points. You have guys that could make an impact every night. You have guys that can help LeBron and Anthony Davis on that team. They have a lot of supporting cast that's really good. And that's, I think, what makes the Lakers dangerous. I think they're going to go to the finals. Again, I don't think they're going to win it at this point in the season. I'm going to stick to Brooklyn right now. But again, the postseason's a long time away. And as for the Bucks, I feel like I say this every year with the Bucks, though. Because, the Bucks are a decent team. They're a decent squad. But, come playoff time, we haven't seen them deliver in the playoffs. I feel like they try to add to their roster every year, and there's just something about them that doesn't make me think they're a favorite in the East. I mean, obviously they're going to go to the playoffs, but I don't think that, to win the East, I don't think they're one of the favorites this year. I think Boston could win the East over them right now. I think Philadelphia could win the East over the Bucks right now. So the Bucks have to figure out a way to improve to one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference so that they can make a playoff run, because I know that's their end goal. Obviously, Giannis signed the extension this offseason, but I think, the Bucks need to start picking it up a little bit. And that is my segment on games this week. To our final segment of the day, we're going to look at the conference standings. Right now, let's go to the Eastern Conference. The 76ers are 10-5. They lead the Eastern Conference, followed by the Boston Celtics, who are 8-5. The Bucks are 9-6 at number 3. The Pacers are 8-6 at number 4. Number 5 is the Nets. They are 9-7. 6 is the Cavaliers. They're 7-7. The Hawks are 7-7, and the Knicks are 7-8. I believe the Knicks are 8-8 now, actually. But the New York Knicks are actually playing well this year. They're playing decent. I think the Knicks could actually hold on to that 8th spot if they keep playing at this level. But other than that, I think that the Pacers are probably going to drop a little bit. The Nets are definitely going to move up. I think the Bucks could drop. I think the Hawks could move up, and I think the Cavaliers could drop. As far as teams that are in the hunt, I think the Heat, again, I say this every week, I think the Heat and the Raptors are going to move up in that into the top 8 for the playoffs. Now to the Western Conference, led by no surprise by the Lakers, 12-4. Then the Clippers are 11-4 at the number 2 spot. Number 3 is the Jazz, 10-4. 4 is the Suns, 8-5. 5 is the Trailblazers, 8-6. Followed by the Warriors, who are also tied for 5th, who are 8-6. The Grizzlies are 7-6, and the Spurs are 8-7. The Mavericks are at the 9th spot at 7-7, and the Nuggets are at the 10th spot at 7-7. 2 teams that I think are going to move up. I think the Spurs are going to drop out still at this point by the end of the season. The Mavericks and the Nuggets are going to move up. I think the Grizzlies might drop a little bit, and I think the Suns actually might move up. The Clippers, I think, are going to drop, and I think the Warriors are going to drop as well at this point in the season. But that's what I have for you today on the RS Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and getting your latest in the NBA. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to hear more just like it, go ahead and tune in every Wednesday and Friday afternoons on YouTube Live, right here on YouTube Live, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you guys so much for the support. Since I started this, I got a lot of people that are really, supporting me, and I really appreciate it. So again, if you enjoy this podcast, you want to hear more just like it, go ahead and tune in every Wednesday and Friday. And this has been your edition of the RS Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, guys.